Okay, welcome back everybody. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam bidvarei. We are in the middle on page Mem Tes, the corresponding in the corresponding English. It's this, where it says the word Zeis, Va'id Acheres, and it's in the original text. It's right in the middle of page Mem Tes, which we were discussing, if you remember, that the Alter Rebbe was reconciling between the two statements of our sages of blessed memory. In one place it says that tzedakah is the greatest mitzvah, and for the reasons the Alter Rebbe explained in the class prior to the previous class, which the Alter Rebbe over here, when we dealt with this explanation, the Alter Rebbe elaborates very much what's the virtue of the mitzvah of tzedakah, even over all the mitzvahs, and it seems to connote that would include limud Torah, the mitzvah of learning Torah. Then another place, another place, stated in the Talmud of our sages of blessed memory, note that Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. We say it's the Mishnah. We say usually in brachas every morning is nothing greater than the mitzvah of learning Torah, or the knowledge of Torah, connecting Hashem through the learning Torah, which seems to contradict, and we Alter Rebbe pointed out that it's not a contradiction at all. So the Alter Rebbe says with the Torah, the Halacha says Talmud Torah, or rather the Gemara states, the Mishnah states with Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, because of the particular virtues which exist in learning Torah over all the mitzvahs. So we spoke about this, and the Alter Rebbe gives three reasons, or three virtues, points out three virtues which exist in the learning Torah over all the mitzvahs. For this very reason, it says with Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, that Talmud Torah, learning Torah, overrides all, again, including all, and we say all means including all mitzvahs, including tzedakah. Rather referring to all mitzvahs, including the mitzvah tzedakah. So when the reconciliation between the two is when you're dealing with the mitzvah tzedakah, for the advantages and the virtues of tzedakah, there's no greater mitzvah of tzedakah, based on the explanation Alter Rebbe gave there. Then when it says Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, because there are certain advantages and certain milas which exist within learning Torah, which doesn't exist by all mitzvahs, including tzedakah. And we went through two of the three. So there was three reasons that the Rebbe speaks, or the Rebbe gives. Tells us why the learning Torah is greater, the union with HaKadosh Baruch Hu by learning Torah is greater, or the mitzvah of learning Torah is greater than all mitzvahs. So the Alter Rebbe says again there's three reasons. Last week we finished two of the reasons. We learned two of the reasons. And this week we learned Zeis, whatever Alter Rebbe is saying, this, which I just told you, the two reasons. Why Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, why the Talmud Torah corresponds is greater than all the mitzvahs. Va'id Acheres, I'm going to tell you a third reason. Now, we're obviously not going to go over the two reasons, because we spoke about it in the last class. We spent pretty much a whole class explaining this, and you're more than welcome to see the past class, including all the previous classes, in this very easy website, in the Tanya link, in the link box Tanya, or, as we mentioned time and again, especially for newcomers, you could find it on the TanyaOnline.com website, TanyaOnline.com, hosted by the same Chashuva, honorable hosts, which we try again to acknowledge their important work in spreading so much Torah throughout the entire globe. And again, we're privileged that they're hosting this very class. So it's the same hosts, but the advantage of that TanyaOnline.com is that it's solely about this class, the Tanya class. You could follow along with the text, and also that easy access to all the previous classes from the very beginning of the Tanya, again with its text. I will just say that after it comes up on the kosher tube, within probably 2-3 hours, usually you could find it on that website. Again, with the advantage that you could follow the class with the text accordingly. So this very class you could find, past class you could find there, the first two advantages of learning Torah over Kiyum Mitzvahs. And here the Alter Rebbe goes on and says, Zeis Va'id Acheres, I'm going to tell you something else, another advantage of learning Torah. And this, what I'm going to tell you now, is a virtue which exists in the learning Torah which is even greater, or a greater advantage than the first two, in its overriding, or in its advantage over kiyum mitzvahs, of doing all mitzvahs, including mitzvah tzedakah. This, which I'm going to tell you, is even greater. Oila al kolona, greater than the first two reasons. As it compares and as it overrides, learning Torah overrides all mitzvahs, or has this special virtue and advantage over all mitzvahs. What is it? But in the advantage and the virtue of the occupation and learning Torah over all the mitzvahs. What is it? Like we learned, based on what we said before referring to Chav Gimel, 23rd chapter. As we know in Tanya, there's Alter Rebbe speaks about many times in Ma'alav the Torah. For that matter, the quote with Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam is quoted multiple times. Alter Rebbe, a shrek from the perspective of Tanya, wasting one moment that could be learned. Torah could be learned, and Torah is not learned. If you learn a little bit Tanya, especially learn a lot of Tanya, the gravity of this, there's no, you can't really describe. When you learn Tanya and see the Alter Rebbe's expanding on this Mishnah, or dealing with this Mishnah with Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, starting from the very first page of Tanya, the Rebbe used to mention. On the first page, the Alter Rebbe speaks about this, the bittul Torah, the chas v'shalom, the gravity of the sin of non-learning Torah. Again, this is a common thread throughout the entire Tanya. Yet, you could arguably say that the Alter Rebbe, 3 chapters he dedicates to the or points out the advantage of learning Torah over kiyum mitzvahs, which is obviously the chapter Hey, the entire 5th chapter, where the Alter Rebbe clearly demonstrates to us, to the Beinoni, to us, that to the Yid, that in the context of connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the point of all Torah mitzvahs, there is ultimately no greater union that the human being, or anybody, at any level, obviously even greater than Neshamas, some Malachim, for that matter, even every mitzvah connects to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, connects the Yid as an entity, as an entity of a Yid, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, more than the Neshamas and Malachim, where they're sitting in Gan Eden, are connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because a mitzvah is HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. Evarim de Malka, the limbs of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is, again, we can't do a mitzvah in Gan Eden. Mitzvahs are dafka ne'olam hazeh, but between all the mitzvahs, no greater union ultimately becomes. It becomes like on all levels, in every level, in every plane, because where there is the absolute connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or the great level of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is precisely in this very physical world. And Alter Rebbe tells you between Torah and mitzvahs, Torah is in a greater union with HaKadosh Baruch Hu than mitzvahs. So that ultimately tells us that in every level, if it's the neshama sitting on Eden for 1,000 years or 2,000 years, the connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and from any entity with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the union with Hashem in via Torah, that unique union overrides any other union which can exist in every single level. It's the Neshama, it's the Malach, or even within this world, which is the message of Hey, as it follows Daled, that between Torah and mitzvahs, the union with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is much greater, much more profound, and the Alter Rebbe Lashon, the Lashon there in Perek Hey, you see the Lashon of the Alter Rebbe as he demonstrates this advantage of Torah over mitzvahs. He uses Lashon there, Maila Yiseda Gdela V'Nifla Le'en Kates. Maila Yiseda Gdela V'Nifla Le'en Kates. Now we spoke about it when we learned Perek Hey. You could again easily tune into that page. That an additional advantage, a great advantage, an awesome, a wondrous, awesome advantage. And then also there's Le'en Kates, to no end. There's no infinite difference in the union of a Yid when he learns Torah, even over his kiyum mitzvahs when he does a mitzvah. That's chapter Hey. In Chav Gimel, the 23rd chapter, and famously again 37. And here the Alter Rebbe, in this ladder, and the ladder of the 3, the final of the 3, which Alter Rebbe points out in this chapter Lamed Zayin, he is again going back to this, picking up on this what he wrote in the 23rd chapter, and that's what he says. Basically, he said Lo'el before B'Shimon Aisenbach, in the name of the Kulim, the Ramach Bikudin, Ramach Evarim de Malka, the 248 mitzvahs out of 248 limbs of Hashem, as opposed to the Torah. The Torah is not a limb of Hashem. The Torah, the energy, the Torah is like the nerve system. And the basic Alter Rebbe is telling us there in Perek Gimel is that when it comes to for example, you deal with the difference of a limb or the nerve system which exists in the brain of man. The nerve system is the energy itself, while a limb is a container to the energy. And try to explain this over here. You can go back as well to the chapter 23, where the Alter Rebbe introduces the contrast between learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. Again, the superiority, the advantage of learning Torah over mitzvahs. You can see it in chapter 23. Again, just scroll down the bar. Open 23, find that place, and you could see it with the text as well in that website, or the original website. You could find it as well. It's easy. You could find it easy with easy access as you on the original website by putting in the word Tanya. But if you could, again, with the text, again on tanyaonline.com, you just scroll down. There's a few classes on 23rd chapter, but again, you could see the link. But we're going to try to, as it's been a while, again, 23, we're on 37. The Alter Rebbe, again, even here elaborates. We're going to try to say this orally. When we explain this as an orally before we do the text, the difference of the limb, the way it becomes a container to the energy of the nefesh, as opposed to the nerve system, which is the energy of the nefesh, is very grand and great. Because when you say a limb, as much as a limb is a davar chai, when you see a limb is davar chai, when you see a limb is something alive and it's a part of the experience of the nefesh, you can look at everybody, any limb, like a hand. We don't even notice, we can't even notice how much a hand, for example, we can't even notice, when you deal with, as an example, when you deal with any limb, take a hand, you even in an average second by a healthy person, a few seconds the hand is moving in every direction. It expresses itself instinctively and formally. And the reason why, and you don't have to command when, for example, someone has a certain hand movement, an instinct hand movement. It's not that he's deciding, okay, now I'm going to move my hand, now I'm going to move my finger. The reason why it comes so instinctively, and it's not like a message and a process. Doesn't take. The Rebbe uses another place that says doesn't take time from the message transferred from the nerve system to the limbs. In this case, to the hand. As an example, we're going to use the hand. Because the limb is a keli to the nefesh. It becomes like really kind of part and parcel with the energy of the nefesh. The energy of the nefesh invests in the limb. It becomes a davar chai. It becomes something which is, you say, not only it's a keli to a davar chai, but it becomes a davar chai. It becomes something which is alive. It's vital. It's alive. It has all those vital signs. The fact that it moves along with the nefesh, as we see it evidently. For example, we say the guf is a garment for the nefesh. Could you compare this garment to an actual garment, a shirt which actually moves along with a hand, with a person? But could you say the shirt is alive? Does it come to life because it moves along with a person when the person walks? Or the person moves his hand, his jacket, his shirt, his or her shirt moves along as well? His or her jacket moves along as well. You can say it becomes a davar chai, it becomes alive. It's alive because it moves along. Not at all. It remains the same material, the same day, the same inanimate. There's no life there. The limb is a lavush to the nefesh, but it's a lavush hamisachi. It becomes one. It becomes a davar chai. It becomes something which is alive. It carries nafshi's dik kite to it. It carries the soul. The soul comes across through the evarim. And this is why mitzvahs are called Evarim de Malka. There's the limbs of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The mitzvahs are HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, because the limbs of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the limbs carry the energy of the nefesh. The mitzvahs carry the nefesh of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the mitzvahs kind of are Evarim de Malka. They're HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. You do a mitzvah, you're hugging HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They're like you hug somebody, you hug them physically. But it's not about the physical connection. It's because of the physical body of the other party carries that nafshi's dikait, that soul. So it's not a deficiency that you embrace the other party with your hands, as an example, because the hands are not only a container for the soul, but they become the nafshi's dik, and that's the point of a mitzvah. A mitzvah is a varim the limbs of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yet, in the end of the day, if you want to dissect this, namely subtly. If you really want to dissect it, you see two different entities coming together. The hand is not the nefesh. The hand is a container of the nefesh, not the nefesh itself. Even though it's a container, lavush hami'uchod, it becomes one. It becomes a living hand. And as we mentioned before, you could see it in any limit. You don't know how many times instinctively you're moving your hand because it's so meuchad with the nefesh. So it becomes kind of alive without any calculation how many times it moves and you shake your head and so on and so forth, because it's part of the nefesh experience. So it's mu'chad with nefesh. Yes, it's two things coming together. The nefesh is investing in the hand. It's not the nefesh. In the end of the day, it's a keli for the nefesh. As opposed to the nerve system, as an example, which is in the brain. That is the energy of the nefesh. That is the energy of the nefesh. And the same thing when we speak about mitzvahs called a varim de malka, well, Torah is called malka itself. Malka rabbanon. Why are rabbanon called malka? Because they learn Torah. And Torah is Hashem. The Anechi Hashem Alikecha. The Eibishter says Anechi is the famous Gemara. Ano nafshi ksavis Yahweh. I took my nefesh ksavis. I wrote it into to the Torah, and I gave it. Ksavis, I wrote it in, and the Yahavis, I gave it over to you. You have my nefesh in the learning Torah. You open a Gemara or a Mishnah, Shnai Mechzim Batal. This is the nefesh, the energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not a keli to the nefesh, a limb to the nefesh. May it be even a levush hamauchad like a mitzvah. But it's the nefesh itself, and that is that great virtue of learning Torah over any other mitzvah. And Al Rebbe says Eilal Kolona, it's a virtue which is even greater than the previous virtues which we learned about the week before in the previous class. And that's what the Al Rebbe says. That like we said in the name of Tikkun Ramach Pikudin, the 248 mitzvahs I say in Ramach Yivarim de Malka. This is the 248 limbs of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the term limbs with much precision. There are a varim dim malka. Just like a physical person, derech mashal is an example. Ein arich v'dim klal. There's no comparison at all. Bein achayis sheberamachi borov, the vitality, the energy, the life, which is in his 248 limbs, in comparison to the life and energy which exists in his brain, which is the nerve system. Or, if you want to say within his brain, again we're dealing with seichel, with the intellect, which is divided to the three pchinot, the three levels of chokhmah, bina, das, chabad, which is chokhmah, bina, das, and wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. As they know, there's other terms, but just so this is the classic terms: wisdom, understanding, knowledge. The difference of chokhmah, bina, das, like we learned in the third chapter, explained very clearly. The Alter Rebbe explains very clearly the difference between the three, even though they're all have in common their intellectual faculties. But yet there's the Chokhmah, the Bina, the Das, which are three steps and stages in the development of intellect in the mind of man. But this Chai is this energy which exists in the brain, in the intellectual faculties, that is the Nefesh itself. That's associated with the Nefesh itself. So it's not a keli to the Nefesh, but it's the Nefesh itself. And so too, Kocha Mamosh, when you're contrasting Torah and Mitzvahs, Derech Moshel is an example of Ravavis of those who indicates. Obviously you can't, this is an example, but the example is so distant, with tens of thousands of different levels of distance from, and it says tens of thousands, it says indicates infinitely different. Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me, let me just correct myself. I want to correct myself. The Alter Rebbe says again, that based on this example, we can understand the infinite difference between between Torah and mitzvahs. This is what I'm saying. Misread. Lahavdil v'revavis havdil is tens of thousands of levels of differences, and Alter Rebbe adds le'en kates beyond tens of thousands, because tens of thousands in the end of the day have a number. Le'en kates mean there is no end, there is no limit. Even the tens of thousands of different levels, it's beyond that in the energy which exists. The godly energy which exists in Torah, as opposed to the godly energy which exists in a mitzvah. And the light, the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is invested in the physical mitzvah, in mitzvahs which are mitzvahs maisius, in the physical mitzvah, the physical doing of the mitzvahs, l'gabei, in comparison to the ha'oris ein sof, the light, the light of the ray, the projection, the ray of the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is invested in Chabad, in Chokhmah Bina Das of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is added as Torah, Shebechokmah Torah, the wisdom of Torah, each one according to his capacity of grasping Torah, Vasagasi, and his perception of Torah. No comparison. You cannot compare the limb, which is a container to the nefesh, as opposed to the meichin, the intellect, the intellectual energy. In fact, intellectual energy, which exists in the brain, which is the nefesh itself, Hence, there's no comparison. The same thing, there's no comparison to the energy which exists in Torah as opposed to the energy which exists in the mitzvahs. Even though, again, in the end of the day, they do have a common denominator. With both, you connect yourself to connect to the BAYT, to the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the Ratzon HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the Ein Sof, to the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, greater than the connection which exists in Gan Eden. May it be a neshama in Gan Eden, the greatest neshama in Gan Eden for thousands of years, because that's the enemy, Ziva Shechina, the ray of the Shechina. While Torah and mitzvahs has in common, this is the essence of the Shechina, but yet, when you contrast Torah and mitzvahs, again, as we learned, we have to be mighty, we have to elaborate. Obviously, this is the point. Mikol chayil mabo, without any limitation, because they're in the enemy. Ziva Shechina, it's not the essence of the Shechina. While here, it's the essence of the Shechina, precisely in this world, by learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. Yet, when you contrast Torah and mitzvahs, there's no comparison in the energy which exists in Torah over the energy which exists in mitzvah. This is a keli, a container to the Elokus. It's a vodim de malka, like it says. It's a limb which is a container to God, while Torah is God Himself. Even though the Alter Rebbe points out, again, a question which he similarly asked in the 5th chapter. If you remember, when the Alter Rebbe speaks about the virtue of Torah, he says in the end, or actually in the 4th chapter, when he speaks about mitzvahs, he says, the mitzvahs, you're telling me that it's God Himself. But the mitzvahs are invested in the physical. It's a pair of tefillin, a physical mezuzah, and a physical sefer Torah, and trumas and maises. So how could you say really you're touching the core essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu if you're dealing with the physical? What does the Alter Rebbe answer there? So the Alter Rebbe answers there, and here the Alter Rebbe is not asking about the mitzvahs, even though there it's about here the Alter speaks about this. The Alter Rebbe asks about the Torah. But if you remember there, the Alter Rebbe's answer there in the end of Perek Daled, that it's like someone, we gave the example, someone's going to say, I embraced, the king embraced me. Oh, the king embraced you, that's nice. What month was it? Yeah, it was the middle of January. He embraced you in January when he was wearing 2 sweaters. He embraced me when I was in this September. He was wearing 1 sweater. Or he had a sleeveless shirt, which is the middle of August. So I had a real embrace. It's nonsense. Because what's the difference? If you have the Guf HaMelech B'Sechem, you have the king himself in his garments that he's wearing. So what's the difference if he's wearing 1 garment or 2? He's wearing if it's a sleeveless shirt, because not a total sleeve. Let's try to understand a shirt with short sleeves. Let's use more of a Kavadik example. We're dealing with a king. So it was hot, so there was no shirt, there was no part of the material of the shirt or part of the hand, and that's when the king embraced. And so, but no one, with a healthy mind, is going to say, well, it was a greater hug and embrace because it was August, and then September he was wearing 1 sweater as opposed to the middle of January he was wearing 2 sweaters or a coat. Guf HaMelech B'Seicham. It's the king is in that garment, a sweater to a coat or a short sleeve shirt. When part of the embrace is without the shirt as well, without the garment, it's irrelevant, because in the end of the day, the king, the king, Guf HaMelech B'Seicham, the body of the king is within these garments. And the Alter Rebbe says, so what if the Torah mitzvahs that you are connecting to is associated with the physicality of this world, tefillin, tzitzis, and so on? The Guf HaMelech B'Seicham, it's the Eibishter himself, is there. So the Alter Rebbe similarly asks the question over here, even though the answer is different, because here he's dealing with Torah. So he says, at the end of the day, Torah, he's saying Torah is the Eibishter himself, Hashem himself. What am I dealing with? Shnai Me'esim B'Talis, Zay Mani Mitzvah, Zay Mani Mitzvah, you open a Mishnah above Mitzvah. It says 2 people are holding a talis. One says, I found it. And so the other found it. What are you dealing with? A godly concepts over here. You're dealing with 2 people which are holding a talis. Alter Rebbe says, if you remember in Perek K, I explained this to you. Alter Rebbe kind of asks the question, or deals with the question there. And it says it's irrelevant. It's because the Torah's verdict. That 2 people have an argument and Torah paskins, or even one person has a question, Torah paskins, if it's brought into halacha, it's based and predicated on Torah, and that verdict is based on Torah, it is ultimately in the nefesh of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. No nafshik savas yahavis is the soul, it's the soul energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's irrelevant what the case is, because that's why Torah is compared to water, as the Lashon Alter Rebbe says, and he repeats this notion over here, that just like water travels from on high and it descends below, so too Torah, even it's part of the nefesh of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and when it descends below and it deals with all these examples dealing with this very physical world, and dictates and demonstrates its Torah verdict in all these cases dealing with the physical, yet it's irrelevant because it's the same Torah, and that's why it's compared to water, because if you look at water, when water is on high and it goes all the way down the mountain, it goes into the valley, as we know, again, that's the nature of water. Then any little perforation, it's all the way heading down and lower and lower and lower, more than any other material that it exists. Sand will come to a stop, for example. Water penetrates to the lowest of the low, but that's the reason why Torah is connected compared to water in Mayim el Torah, because it goes to the lowest levels. In other words, it starts on high, but it goes all the way to these cases which deal with the physical, and you deal with even two people arguing, one is even lying. It's irrelevant because Torah penetrates the lowest of the low. And one more advantage, and that for this reason Torah is compared to water, because water, whatever begins on high, that's the same material which ends up below. It's not a different material. It doesn't change in its very nature as it travels from on high to the lowest of low. Of the low. It's the same water, the same thing. the same Torah, which again begins, you say, Das Bahari Kedesh, this is the Nefesh of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Anechi, the core essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As you open a Gemara, it plunged. These cases deal with the physical world, and not only with the physical world, even things which are associated with the cheshech, the darkness of Elohazah, two people holding and arguing and lying and so on. But at the end of the day, it's a verdict of Torah, so it carries that same nefesh, it carries the same anechi of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is all that it said. Here, even though your perception of Torah is only on the physical level, the way Torah deals with the different cases, which again on this physical realm, nonetheless, Arieh is compared to water, that descend from a very high place, etc. Like we said, we explained before. Where before? In Pedic Hay, the first place, Rebbe deals with the superiority and advantage of Torah, the virtue of Torah, even over Kima Mitzvahs. But Apple Pikain, here the Alter Rebbe goes on and says, Omer Razal, the Razal tells Lemedesh, Yikir La Maisa. Vayem must say some ksiv matl Talmud Torah, Kikim Mitzvahs Maisi, is Shikshiev Shal Seis Al De'achayim. The Rebbe is going to point out over here, if that's the case, why do we stop doing a mitzvah? Why do we stop learning Torah to do a mitzvah? So we have the famous Gemara. The Gemara asks a contradiction, and the Gemara says, in one place it says that nothing is compared to Torah, even Cheptzei Shamayim, even mitzvahs, which are considered not Cheptzecha, it's not your doings, not Masecha, it's not Rechecha, this is Cheptzei Shamayim, this is godly actions or doings associated with godliness, which is again, i.e. the mitzvah, classified as a mitzvah, it's a Chepetz Shamayim. So the Gemara says that Chol Chafetzecha, which means nothing is compared to Torah, even Cheptzei Shamayim, because it's Kol Chafetzecha, which includes even a mitzvah. Another place it says that you have to stop learning Torah doing a mitzvah. What does the Gemara say? What is the Gemara answer? The Gemara says like this: a mitzvah that you can do, a mitzvah rather someone else can do for you. It could be done through someone else. For example, you had a check for tzedakah, and the individual comes to pick it up, or rather, like the individual, maybe you have to hand it over to him, save it, put him up. It's a nice place. But let's say you sent sent a courier to pick up the check, and you're in the middle of a chabrusa learning a daf gemara with somebody, as an example. Then the guy knocks on the door. There's somebody there at the door. You can hand it over to the courier. You should not stop learning, because the mitzvah will be done without your interruption of your learning Torah. And why should you interrupt? Because Talmud Torah is the greatest mitzvah of all. Nothing compares to the limit of Torah. Even though in this case it's the mitzvah of tzedakah, which is such a great mitzvah, you should not stop learning because it could be done without your interruption. And the Gemara says, where it says that there's a mile of mitzvah, you have to stop learning Torah. It's a mitzvah you cannot do, someone else cannot do for you. People cannot put on tefillin for someone. It's interesting. Tefillin, the halacha, it's an interesting, it's a whole arichas. But let's use tefillin as an example. Tefillin I have to put on myself. You should not put on tefillin for me. So I have to stop learning Torah. And this is the way the Gemara reconciles. A mitzvah she'ef sh'lasei sadachayim, you can do something for someone else, you're not allowed to stop learning Torah, because Talmud Torah can get kulam. And kol chafetzecha lishvuvah, even cheptzei shamayim. But a mitzvah you can't do through others. So when someone should not do it for you, cannot do it for you, you must stop learning Torah. Wonderful explanation, good reconciliation. But the question begs, and if a mitzvah that cannot be done through others, why does that justify me to stop learning Torah? If by definition, inherently, Teda is greater than all mitzvahs, for the reasons that we know, and Al Rebbe again says over here in Hey, and before starting from Hey, Chav Gimel, and here Lamed Zayin and Lamed Zayin, he adds the first two mitzvahs, or rather these first two reasons, which we learned last week again of the specialty of the Maila, the important advantage of learning Torah over Kima Mitzvahs, based again on the Mishnah, which says V'Talmud Torah Kineged Kulam. At the end of the day, Torah is greater, and especially with again based on these explanations. And let's just take this last explanation. It says Eila Kulan, which is a greater virtue again, or a greater Maila demonstrated over here in this reason, even over the previous two reasons. So let's look at it on its own merit and say that mitzvah is a varim to malka. Mitzvah is only a limb to the melech, and it's only a limb. In other words, only a container for the nefesh. The Torah itself is the nefesh itself. The nefesh of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, no nafshik sovas yav is done nechi. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in the learning of that Torah. So the question begs: so what if it's a mitzvah that someone else cannot do for me? Why should I stop? What gives me the right to stop learning Torah? I'm connecting to the nefesh of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not only to the limb of HaKadosh Baruch Hu as much as the limb is a levush hamiyuchad, the ma'uchad, it's one with the nefesh. But in the end of the day, it's ultimately a container. The Alter Rebbe says the difference is infinite. So let me remain with my learning Torah. What gives me the right to stop and do something which is infinitely less, maybe even a mitzvah, in comparison to learning Torah? As we said, I say in comparison because we know Torah mitzvah, there is the common denominator, but in comparison, we contrast learning Torah. Torah says it's infinitely greater. So what gives me the right to stop doing a mitzvah? According to Torah, according to Allah Bahiyah, the Alter Rebbe says, when it comes to mitzvah you can't do through others, you must stop learning Torah. Because here we're not dealing with the spiritual gain or the spiritual connection that you are connecting to. Here we're dealing with a master plan of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And for the master plan of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you ought to follow that master plan, because that's why you were created, that's why I was created, that's why every individual was created. And because as we learned this time and again, based on the Medrash Tanchuma, what is the master plan of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted a dwelling place, an abode where? Not Ba'al Yainim, not in the heavens above, and not in any spiritual experience. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted in this very physical world. How do we fulfill, how do we align ourselves, identify with this master plan, that we take the physical and we transform it to elokus, to godliness, based on all the explanation of the Rebbe Lamed Vav, Lamed Zayin, which is again primarily and predominantly via the mitzvah that we do. We take the wool and we make it a mitzvah tzitzis. We take the parchment, we make it a mitzvah tefillin, we put on the tefillin. We make a bracha, we put on the tefillin, we take the parchment, we make a mezuzah. And again, the Alter Rebbe in these previous chapters tells us exactly what's transpiring behind the scenes, or in front of in the center of this action, what is happening, what is unfolding in the context of fulfilling the wishes and desires rather of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, aligning oneself with the master plan of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that is accomplished precisely through mitzvah, not through limudat Torah. So when you're dealing with your connection, it's like a little bit, in a very similar, like we said last week, the Mishnah says, greater is the experience of Gan Eden, more than all the tainugim, delights and delicacies a person could ever have in this very physical world. One moment! Shah achas and Gan Eden over the entire experience of this physical world. May it be a person only experiences pleasure throughout the 120 or all his life, which hopefully may and Chaim Nitzchim. In the end of the day, the Mishnah tells us that even you would experience throughout your entire life only pleasure. Only pleasure, never problems. One moment in Gan Eden, that pleasure in Gan Eden for one moment is greater than Kol Chai Olam Hazeh, the entire world, the entire life of this physical world. But yet the same Mishnah says that Tshuva Ma'asim Tovim Be'olam Hazeh is greater than Kol Chai Olam Hazeh, not one moment in Gan Eden. The entire life of Gan Eden, including Moshe Rabbeinu's experience of the last 3,300 years, which is Eila Mechayil Choyil within Gan Eden, and there's no end. Tzadikim Yeshim and enemies of Hashem say Yelchu Mechayil Choyil, because there is no end, because you're dealing with a godly revelation that Hashem is Ein Sof. So too the experiences of Gan Eden is Ein Sof. But yet, one moment in Tshuva Ma'asim Tovim in this physical world is created called Chayil Mabah. How does that work? What's the reconciliation of this Mishnah? We spoke about this a few times, including last week's class. But we're just using this as an example to see, yes, from the expression, from the point of view of your experience, your pleasure, the pleasure of the Nivra, the pleasure of this entity was just trying to derive pleasure from its creator. Obviously, how could you compare the pleasure of the neshama when it sits on to the pleasure of El Nasa? You're tapping into the Mekayr Kol Tanug, into the source of all pleasures. But when you're dealing with a tiny BAYT, you're dealing with the pleasure of a creator which had a plan in creating everything, including Elam Haba, including Gan Eden, which was the creation of this very physical world, and he's demonstrated in his own Torah that the reason why I created everything is because I had a desire, like it says Medrash Tanchum in Isave, which is a taiva, is when we speak about desire, inner desire, even lahavdil by the human being, a desire comes from a very deep place within the nefesh, and so too lahavdil when you're dealing with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, nis'ava Kodesh Baruch Hu liyas leidira batachtenim. Kodesh Baruch Hu wanted, had an inner desire to have a dwelling place in this very physical world. So when you take the physical world, and again, how do we implement this master, or how do we identify with this master plan? How do we implement this dira b'tachtein, making Kodesh Baruch Hu a dwelling place in this physical world? When we take the physical and we transform it to a lakus, we transmute that physical parchment into a godly, into a godly reality, and a godly object. Again, as we explain how it exactly works and what transpires when I do a mitzvah. That's the way I make a Kodesh Baruch Hu dira b'tachtenim. So we're not dealing with the level that I want to connect to, or the level I can connect to, which is the advantage of learning Torah as opposed to mitzvahs. This is the nefesh of a Kodesh Baruch Hu. This is just the limb of a Kodesh Baruch Hu, which is a container for Hashem's nefesh, a vadim de malka, because here you're dealing with a Kodesh Baruch Hu, the master plan for which everything was created, which is again to make a Kodesh Baruch Hu dira b'tachtenim, and that's primarily through a mitzvah, not through limud Torah. Even though the Torah has that dimension as well, that we're transforming something, because we can't limit that Torah to have been self-explained, that you're moving your lips, there's some mice involved, and you get involved in learning Torah, so there's somewhat connected to your physical body, or to the physical dimension of yourself, but yet how can you compare it to the investment of the body when he does a mitzvah? Or even the mitzvah itself, you're dealing with the physical object, and you're transforming it, and you're elevating it to a lakus, to godliness. This is the way you fulfill the ultimate implementation and realization of a Kodesh Baruch Hu's taiva, nis'ava Kodesh Baruch Hu, making a dwelling place for Kodesh Baruch Hu. So obviously you have to stop learning Torah in order to identify with the master plan, to align yourself with Hashem's master plan, and making for himself a dira, for Hashem a dira batachtenim, tachtein, the inferior, that is primarily, predominantly through doing a mitzvah. So obviously you have to stop. So when the mitzvah is, and this is again the point of the Gemara, when the mitzvah is being done, can be done through someone else, why should you stop? There's no deficiency in the progress of dira b'tachteinu. There's no deficiency at all, because it can be done through someone else, and it will be done through someone else. If it will be done through someone else, obviously, right? If there's no one standing at the door, you ought to pick yourself up, make sure that courier gets that check in order to him to bring it to the one who has the meiser, or distributing to the poor people, or to building his yeshiva and so on, and Talmud Torah, or any other holy or divine institution, an institution carrying the divine message of Hashem. You have to stop learning Torah because there is no one there at the door to pass that check on. So, but if there is, so the mitzvah will be done. The mitzvah of tzedakah will be done. In other words, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's master, Hashem's master plan will be implemented. The tzedakah will move on from your possession to the possession of the receiver, or any other mitzvah that could be done through another party, because it's not compromising on the process and the progress of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's dira b'tachteinu, when it goes to the progress and the process of the realization, implementation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's master plan of making HaKadosh Baruch Hu dira b'tachteinu, because it's being done. That's what the Gemara says. It could be done. It's a nasa al yidei acherim. Other people are doing it. It means it's being done. You're not compromising again on the whole movement and the whole process. As opposed to a mitzvah, it can't be done through someone else, but you want to learn Torah. You're going to want to learn Torah, you want to learn Torah, and you want to connect to something grand and high and so deep within HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but you're compromising for what? The whole entire reason why HaKadosh Baruch Hu created everything. and therefore I'm not going to do that mitzvah. That doesn't work, because you were created, you're part of this master plan of making Hashem Adira B'Tachtenim, a dwelling place for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So you have to stop from your personal interest and experience and the sensational experience of connecting to the Anechi, to the core essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, your soul uniting with the core essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which again exists precisely in learning Torah even over Kima Mitzvahs. Again, this is just a limb which carries the Hashem's Nefesh, while Limud Torah is Hashem's Nefesh. That is your wonderful experience, but you ought to stop that experience, because it's compromising for what you and everything else was created in order to make HaKadosh Baruch Hu a dwelling place in this physical world, which is done through that mitzvah. It cannot be done through someone else, or by the definition of the mitzvah, or in the circumstances we just gave the example. You have to stop, because in the end of the day, we're all here to implement Hashem's master plan, making a dira for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's what he says. Nonetheless, our sages of blessed memories tell us that it's not about the medrash, which means it's just the learning Torah on its own, it's about the action. Today in this physical world, we involved in doing what Hashem wants. See, this is what it says, today, and again a pasuk in Torah, which says today, throughout the entire span of the person's life, that's the day, the time he has to invest in action. Is that you do stop learning Torah to implement and fulfill mitzvahs associated with action, when it cannot be done through others. Mishum, why? Because this is the entire purpose of man and the ultimate objective of his creation. Hazan is descend into this physical world, the neshama descending into the physical world and him clothing itself in a physical body, that establish for HaKadosh Baruch Hu a home and abode in this very physical world. In this low physical world, and again within this physical world, with the physical matters of the world, the wool, the parchment, and so on and so forth, the trumas, the maises, with all the mitzvahs, which again, as we mentioned time and again, the significant majority of the mitzvahs are implemented by a maisa dealing with the very physical world, to transform the physical world from a state of darkness to a state of light. It's Hashem's ultimate plan is that the entire physical world, as kol gashmi is like the entire physical world, not Oretz Elyoina Gadei, but as kol ha'oretz hagashmi is like the very physical world should be full with the honor of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'ro kol basar yachdav, that every flesh will be able to see in unison together the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the diuk. The point over here, and this is again the reason why the Alter Rebbe brings this pasuk from Yeshaya, not kol haneshamas yachtov, we'll see it goes kol basar yachtov. The physical flesh will be able to identify with the godly reality. Identify the godly reality means to say the godly reality has penetrated the very physical, because the very physical has been transformed from a state of darkness to light, which is again via the doing the mitzvah. As opposed to Masha'eking Shef, like we just said, and again we're going to go through the text of it, when it can be done through others. You're not supposed to battle Talmud Torah. You're not supposed to stop learning Torah. Because if it can be done through others, so it will be done through others. So there's no compromising on this very master plan. So what should you do? Obviously continue learning Torah, continue to connect to the very core essence, the Nefesh of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not to stop that experience for the Aver, for the limb of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the mitzvah. Even though Kol HaTeirenu Pirush HaMitzvahs Maisiyos, even though the Torah is only the explanation and tells us how to perform the mitzvah, so logically one would say, when you have the opportunity to stop learning Torah, to do the mitzvah, obviously do that. Just for its own merit, because all Torah explains us. You open a Mishnah, it tells us how to perform a mitzvah. So stop learning the Torah in order to do the mitzvah. But no, if the mitzvah could be done through someone else, you do not do so, because, like we said before, Shebchinas Chabad Shalein Sabar, with Torah is the intellect, and the wisdom, understanding, and knowledge of HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, of the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As opposed to a limb, it is the intellect itself of Hashem. It's the Nefesh itself of Hashem. When you occupy yourself in learning Torah, you drop on yourself the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Blessed be He, with greater intensity and greater strength and greater energy. with greater energy, and the ha'ara, like we said before, is greater. This light of which comes from the Ein Sof Baruch Hu, by learning Torah, which you connect to rather by learning Torah, is le'en kates, infinitely greater, brighter, and grander, which from the light and which is drawn to you through mitzvahs, which are only evarim demalka. I say only again in contrast to Torah, which are the limbs of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we'll conclude today's class with one line. You see it till to the two dots on page 98. The Rebbe says, "This is what Rabbi Sheshes famously said: Chadoi nafshoi, my soul rejoices with you, Torah, and therefore l'chakroi, I will learn you," which is referring to Torah Shebiksav, namely l'chatanoi, I will learn you, which is Torah Shebapeh, which is Mishnah as opposed to Mikra. Mishnah is Barim Makom Acha Barichos, like he's explained elsewhere. Rabbi Sheshes is demonstrating his appreciation and his joy and his elation learning Torah. Why only learning Torah? Why not mitzvahs? So to say that Rabbi Sheshes did not know the virtue of mitzvahs, he wasn't excited to do mitzvahs, is nonsense. It's Rabbi Sheshes, famous Amnei Rabbi Sheshes, when he did a mitzvah, he was very excited. But when he had to demonstrate his excitement, when he wanted to demonstrate his excitement in the connection with HaKadosh, the climactic manner of connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he attributed to the Torah experience, or he identified the Torah experience over the mitzvah experience, and he said, "Chadoi nafshoi, I'm excited, Chadoi Lashon Chedva, I'm elated with you, Torah. My soul is excited with you, Torah, and therefore l'chakroi, you I will learn, l'chatanoi," again, the different dimensions of Torah, because in the end of the day, when you're dealing with the excitement or the connection of the neshama with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, obviously there is no comparison to the way the neshama connects to the Kodesh Baruch Hu via Torah as opposed to mitzvahs, like we just explained. Le'en kate, it's infinitely greater, which is Baruch Machabarich, like explained again elsewhere in length, namely the same basic explanation over here. The Rebbe gives that despite when it comes to a mitzvah sheyev shel, obviously we have to, as a mitzvah cannot be done through others, obviously we have to stop, because we always have to align ourselves for what everything, and why Hashem created everything, that very master plan. But yet, when it comes to a mitzvah which can be done through others, in other words, the master plan, the process of the implementation and the unfolding and the realization of the master plan is not interrupted, obviously, then you should continue learning Torah, because you're connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu on a very different, not only very different, but an infinitely greater level. In the Kiyum Mitzvahs, have a wonderful evening.